Things gon' change when I really hit the field. Undefeated chance, man, you know what's the deal. Tryna find a kid, I'm in the field doing drills. Boy, you just a sucker, you ain't never keep it real. 3 rings in my hand, I'm a warrior to the max. When I hang it up, they gon' have to give me plaques. Step up in the building and I only bring the facts. When I make a highlight, they gon' replay, run it back. Okay, always locked in, now I don't got time to lax. Saying he the best, he could take a lap. Batted 1,000 when you check the stats. Boy, is you ready? You ain't gotta ask.
Welcome everybody into Hitting the Field here on a Monday. I am your host, Nick Geddes, and I am joined here by Tyler Caron, who is our lead basketball analyst here on HGF. Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's been a wild couple of days for sure. And, you know, call me the lead basketball guy specifically for college. Some call me the expert, the genius. I blame Alex Funderburk for that, for this bracket here that some call fun. I just call it pain. I'm just going to get rid of that because that's out the window. So now I get to root for the upset. So I'm ready for the next couple of days.
I know they said they call you genius, but based on your bracket there, I don't think we can call you that today. How many brackets did you fill out, by the way?
I would say throughout from Monday to Thursday or Friday, it was probably 20. I probably hit the max on ESPN, just playing around with different stuff. And then when it came down to actually submitting a bracket for leagues and stuff, I filled one out that morning. But yeah, I have at least 20 brackets on my ESPN account.
Wow. That is dedication right there, everybody. Let's jump on in because we have more upsets than usual this year, it feels like, in March Madness. And we'll start in the west side of the bracket where obviously Gonzaga has taken care of business. They were able to get their first round matchup easily by 40 points. The big one here, obviously Virginia goes out to Ohio, and maybe a little bit of surprise because I think everybody was kind of picking the 12 seed to beat Creighton, who was the 5 seed. Creighton was able to move on. Tyler, what did you see out of this side, and how did this impact your bracket?
Yeah, so I actually had Ohio and Creighton. So that was one of the things early on. It was looking pretty good. I think in the West, I was perfect, and I'm still perfect in the West. So if we're just looking at the West, I'm doing very well. But yeah, like you said, Gonzaga's rolling through. I think Ohio will beat Creighton. And like I said, this is all stuff that I picked. USC over Kansas, and then Iowa and Oregon. Oregon had the easy bid to the second round with VCU getting COVID complications, which is unfortunate for them. Their head coach did a lot of interviews this week, and he just kind of said it's a bummer, you know, we're a young group. Guys are really excited to get to play in the tournament, and they just couldn't. So Oregon comes in without playing a game, which I think helps and hurts them, but mostly hurts because in that first round, you kind of get to feel it out. You know, it's tournament time. This is a higher stage. And that VCU game would have been a really close match, which I think helps fuel the fire to start a run in the tournament. So ultimately, they're going to come on and face a really good Iowa team, and I think they get smacked.
Yeah, they're coming in to face Iowa, obviously, like you said, and it's like, you know, welcome to the show. Here's Luka Garza. And, you know, Iowa, obviously, in that first round matchup against Grand Canyon, not really threatened that much. I think they kind of just coasted through that one. They still put up a lot of points in that game. But looking elsewhere, you said you have USC over Kansas. I'm a little shocked by that one because I like the way that Kansas played in that first game. So what's the rationale there? What do you see in USC?
Well, it's more of what I don't see in Kansas because I haven't been high on USC all year. I listen to Andy Katz a lot. I love Andy Katz, you know, one of the best college basketball analysts there is. And he's been high on USC specifically for Evan Mobley, and rightfully so. He's a future top 5 pick in the NBA draft next year. But I just don't see it with Kansas. I think that they were good enough to get out of the first round. But regardless of who they played, whether it's going to be USC, Drake, or Wichita, I thought that they would get beat in this second round. I think they have some talented guys. Myles Garrett has obviously been pretty good this entire season. A little bit, he was the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year, which didn't happen. Went to Jared Butler, and rightfully so. But I just don't think, even under Bill Self and his experience, that I don't think they have what it takes to really make a run and even get to the Sweet 16. And like I said, especially when you're taking on the Mobley trio with Evan Isaiah and then the dad as a coach. Like I just think, and then they have a decent supporting cast around them. But I think USC does prevail in this matchup.
Yeah, and I have to say I totally misguided here on the Pac-12. If you recall last week on bets, I did not pick a single Pac-12 team to get out of the first round. I had an agenda against them, and I've eaten my words, and that's why my bracket is dead last in my group. But that's obviously that's usual. But going to the east side of the bracket, we saw a lot of surprises here as well. Tyler, you have got to be heartbroken over this Texas team. I know how much you love them, and you were hyping them up, saying they were a Final Four team. What happened?
They just played really bad basketball. I don't know how it's, and I mean, Abilene Christian, they played good basketball, you know, but I mean, the shot differential was where that was the craziest thing to me. And so I'll take that back. It wasn't even that Abilene Christian played well. It was Texas really didn't. Usually when I'm watching Texas throughout most of the season, they have their speed bumps, but they're having fun out there. And that's one thing that I look for in teams. This is a sport they love. They should be having fun. And teams who have fun usually do very well, which is what I saw with Baylor yesterday, by the way. At one point there in the second half was kind of close, and they went on that little run. They were having fun, and that's what's so important in the tournament. But the shot differential, Abilene Christian, I think, had 27 more field goal attempts than Texas. How does that happen? Well, 23 turnovers, which was a season high by far for Texas. That doesn't help, and that's really what kind of got him to that point. You know, Matt Coleman, I don't think really rose to the occasion. He took some bad shots late, had some bad turnovers late. So not to put all this one on Matt Coleman, it's a team effort, but man, it just was really tough to watch in that second half.
Yeah, Shaka Smart team has really not advanced far in the tournament since his days at VCU. So definitely disappointing for Texas there. Looking elsewhere in the East here, we have Michigan, LSU, Colorado, Florida State, UCLA, who is really going on a little run here against, now they get Abilene, a chance to move on to the Sweet 16, and Maryland and Alabama. Who do you have in these games, and which big seed here, the high seed, do you think is on the biggest upset alert?
I think you hit it right with UCLA. They're kind of starting to get hot from the first four playing games. One of those teams always makes it through to the Sweet 16. It just always happens. I think UCLA is that team, and I thought so once they beat Michigan State, who I thought Michigan State would beat UCLA and they would be that team, but I knew either team that won that first four in game would make the run. So I think UCLA, they'll go on through. So I originally had Iona over Alabama, and I think that Iona played a really good 34 minutes of basketball before, you know, they just kind of ran out of gas playing a team as good as Alabama in the first round of the March Madness tournament. So Alabama came out on top. So I think that with Texas losing, that really lets Alabama off the hook, because, you know, when I was picking that Iona pick, the risk for reward wasn't really there, but I like to make bold moves on my bracket. But I kind of had the fallback of, okay, if Alabama moves on, Texas is going to knock them out eventually. Now Texas isn't going to be there. It's going to be UCLA or Abilene Christian. So I think Alabama pretty much has a pretty easy ride to the Sweet 16 from here on out, and then to the Elite Eight. And then it's going to be, I think, between them, Michigan or FSU to move on to the Final Four from that region.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I was drinking the Iona Kool-Aid coming into this one. That was one of my big upsets that missed. But Alabama, yeah, like you said, they have such a clear path to at least the Elite Eight there, at least seed-wise. Of course, anything can happen. And with the way UCLA is playing, they're one of those teams that look like they could go on a little run here. But that remains to be seen. Switching over to the South side, you mentioned Baylor, how much fun they were having, and they were able to get a big win over Wisconsin, who took down North Carolina with ease, which that was one of my biggest shockings of the first round, really. The non-upsets with North Carolina going down like that. But we also had Villanova beat Winthrop, which is another popular pick in that region. We had North Texas over Purdue. We had Oral Roberts, for crying out loud, is just taking down Ohio State and Florida. So much madness is going on in this South bracket. What did this do to your bracket, and what do you see from here on out?
So I had Baylor and I had Villanova. I almost got on that Winthrop train with I can't remember what his name is right now, but that 6'8" point guard that can really do it all. And he I know he shot 2 for 10 in that game, but he still had 8 assists, 8 rebounds. So that kid can play. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Godrin? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he can play. But yeah, when you're going up against a team like Villanova, who is obviously a little bit of a diminished team without Colin Gillespie, who was having a really good year, and I think he really tied that group together. However, I've said it all year long. I love my post players, and I love Jeremiah Robinson Earl. So I kind of put my trust in him for the first round, and he came through with it. Villanova moves on. They're going to go on to play Baylor, who I had Baylor from the start, coming out, going to the Final Four. I still think that holds true. Now with Arkansas, that one stung a little bit. I did have them moving out of the first round, but now that they go on to play Oral Roberts, who has had a heck of a Cinderella so far, and I think they do have a shot at beating Arkansas. However, I think Arkansas does come out on top when Oral Roberts, like Florida's a solid team. I did have Florida over Ohio State originally, and so now that didn't even hold through. But yeah, so I think that Baylor comes out on top. They're going to play Arkansas in the Elite Eight, and Baylor comes out victorious to get to the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that one, especially Loya Roberts. They kind of remind me in a way, not like obviously play style, but they remind me in a way of that FGCU team from years back. Was that 2013? It's hard to believe it. 2013. I think it's been 8 years. It's crazy. But they got to the Sweet 16, but they got stopped by Florida. Put up a good fight. I think that's the same thing that happens here with Loyola and Arkansas as well. Arkansas, I didn't get a chance to watch them that much this season, but I've been pretty impressed by the way they've played. They were able to hang on against Texas Tech, who I was high on as well. But switching over also to the Midwest, this is obviously where Illinois, down goes the third overall seed, whatever it was, in the entire bracket. Illinois, well, you can't say they're an underdog anymore. You can't. And the one team that I think is a true Cinderella story is Oregon State, that we haven't talked about much. Oregon State was an 8 or 9 seed, I believe, in that Pac-12 tournament, and they went on a run, and they win the tournament. They get in. They win that first game over Tennessee. They beat Oklahoma State, and Cade Cunningham kind of stifled him in that game until late in the game. And now it's going to be Loyola and Oregon State they're going to play for a chance to go in the Elite Eight, which is just crazy. And of course, Syracuse and Houston, another team. Syracuse to me has UCLA vibes on them, but of course, this is a team that has always done well in the postseason, despite the regular season woes or unfortunate that they've had under Boeheim lately. I can't imagine that you had much of this side of the bracket, correct? Enlighten us on what you had going in, and what do you see from here on out?
No, so I think this whole March Madness has been crazy with the upsets and stuff, but I think you look at this region in particular, and it is making this March Madness is making up for all the madness that we lost last year. And this region is a perfect example of all the upsets. You got the one seed Illinois eliminated, the 3 seed West Virginia eliminated, the 4 seed Oklahoma State eliminated. Those teams were a lot of Final Four picks coming out of this region. So yeah, with this, I did have Syracuse advancing out of the first round. I did have Oregon State advancing out of the first round, but then I did have Oklahoma State advancing. I had Illinois advancing. I had West Virginia advancing. The one pick that almost held true and they blew it at the end was I had Rutgers over Houston. Houston is a team that, and many have disagreed with me, I have never been high on Houston ever. If they play in the American and they lose to a team like ECU and they don't have like my respect when it comes to a March Madness tournament. And now they have to play. Now they get a bunch of high seeds in a cruise to the Final Four. Honestly, that's how I'm looking at it. I'm hoping Loyola does come out on top. I saw a tweet that I thought was really funny about the Celtics need to go out and hire Sister Jean to try to get some luck going on their side. But no, I really am hoping that Loyola Chicago pulls through and beats Houston to get to the Final Four. Will it happen? I don't know, but Cameron Crutwig is my favorite player in college basketball right now.
Yeah, Crutwig's becoming, a folk hero really right now in all of sports. You're going to be hearing that name, I think, down the line as when we remember 2021 and everything that this tournament has stood for, and with so much joy has been brought to so many people in a bad year. But also looking forward, throw the brackets out. You already ripped it up. Throw it out completely. Who, if you had to look at the way the bracket is set up right now, give me your Final Four. Who do you have, and who's playing the best basketball to get there?
So I'll start back from the West. I think Gonzaga, they're still my national champions. I still see that holding true, despite all the upsets, with everything and the teams that are getting hot now. Gonzaga comes out of the West. They beat Iowa in the Elite Eight. I still, like I said, that side of my bracket still perfect. I'm hoping that still that rides through to the Final Four and to the national championship. In the East, that's where, like I said, it's kind of up for grabs between Bama, Michigan, FSU. I did have Texas coming out of there, but I did also have FSU to play them in the Elite Eight. So I'm going to go with FSU. They're going to beat Michigan in the Sweet 16. And then in the South, Baylor, I think that in coming out of that pause towards the end of the season and then getting upset in the Big 12 tournament, it kind of hurt them, but I'm still super high on Baylor with that guard trio that they have. I think that they are a very dangerous team. Like I said, they like to have fun out there on the court. They have fun. Those guards like to throw lobs to their forwards trailing down the paint. So I have Baylor. And then I'm going to go with Loyola Chicago just because I cannot pick Houston to the Final Four. I cannot eat those words, even though they have this is the easiest path they could have picked on paper with all the upsets. I'm still going to go with Loyola Chicago. They're going to get back to the Final Four again. They're going to beat Houston in the Elite Eight. And like I said, they're not so much a Cinderella anymore with their resume in past tournaments and what they have now in this tournament. I'm going with Loyola Chicago.
Yeah, that's crazy. Who would have ever thought that one? But that's the way it goes, and that's the beauty of it. Thank you, Tyler, for being on, talking about college basketball and everything that's been going on. But stick with us, because when we return, Tyler's going to stick around with us, and we're going to jump into NFL free agency. Kenny Gallaudet, Juju Smith-Schuster, Will Fuller specifically. They have all signed deals here in free agency, and what that means for the 2021 NFL season. Stick with us.
Hey, everyone. I hope you're enjoying today's episode on Hitting the Field Network. On my show, Take Me Out to the Podcast, we're bringing you the latest in MLB news and some incredible interviews with some incredible people, including Bobby from Outta Here Baseball, Bailey from Foolish Baseball, Dawson Wright, Alec Palmer from Momentum, and so many more. Be sure to tune in to Take Me Out to the Podcast every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on HTFN.
Welcome, everybody, back to HTF here on a Monday. We are still joined by Tyler Caron here as we dive into NFL free agency talk, but we are joined by John Alfano. John, how's it going today?
It's going. That's one way to put it.
Yeah, we're at that point where it's just going for sure. Obviously, in the heat of March Madness, NFL free agency has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle as we get into week 2 of it. But we're going to dive into this wide receiver market. As y'all know, it was very slow moving. We had a couple interesting deals, like Nelson Aguilar signing for $13 million a year with New England. Pretty interesting there. But the 3 big names on everybody's mind was Kenny Gallaudet, Will Fuller, and Juju Smith-Schuster. Where were they going to end up? And after all the speculation, first domino fall with Kenny Gallaudet. He was able to sign a massive deal with the Giants, 4 years, $74 million. He did not play much last year. Obviously, the 2 years before that, he was a 1,000-yard receiver. John, did this surprise you at all that Kenny Gallaudet ended up on the Giants, and what kind of impact do you see him having there?
I don't think it was that surprising that he ended up with the Giants. I mean, maybe it wasn't the favorite team, but they were definitely linked to him for a while. I think the Giants now, with the addition of Gallaudet, have a really solid supporting cast. You've got Saquon, you've got Gallaudet, you've got Evan Drops Ingram, you've got Darius Slayton. They've got a good supporting cast, but for me, the question mark is Daniel Jones. He hasn't shown me enough to prove he can be a true number 1 starter in this league, and I think that is the biggest question mark going into the Giants season on offense, at least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody's saying if Daniel Jones couldn't get it done with this cast, then it's time to move on. And I would say from the outside looking in, I think if you're the Giants, you have to even consider looking at options this offseason, because there just really hasn't been there much for me to be convinced that Daniel Jones is the guy. Tyler, obviously Kenny Gallaudet, very talented receiver, going into his 28 years, he's going into his prime, 28 years old. He goes from Matt Stafford to Daniel Jones, and an offense that is pretty limited on what they've been able to do the last few years with Daniel Jones. is this the right move for Kenny Gallaudet? I mean, or money talks, we all know that, but is this the right move for him for his career?
So I think that I like Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes. I think that he will prove himself this season. Like John said, he's been throwing to Evan Ingram, who he's just proved me wrong way too many times on my fantasy teams. And I'm just not super high on him. But yeah, no, with the cast of, yeah, like John said, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Saquon's going to be back. I think this is a decent situation for Kenny Gallaudet. Now, there were talks of him coming to my Patriots for a little bit. Obviously, that didn't happen. And for Galladay's sake, I'm happy for him because I think with that 4-year contract, eventually the Patriots will find their quarterback, but I don't think Cam Newton is it. Stidham, who knows what's going to come from him this season, depending on like if he gets some PT in there, get some reps in. But I'm overall okay with Kenny Galladay's decision to go to the Giants for sure. Like I said, last year he was battling injury. Before that, he was looking like a Megatron Jr. out there a little bit, showing flashes of that. So I think that Kenny Galladay will really rise in his career in New York.
You mentioned New England a little bit there. I'll throw it right back at you real quick. Just general assessment. How do you think New England's done? They've been the hot team here in free agency so far.
In all my life growing up as a Patriots fan, we haven't seen anything quite like this under Belichick, spending more in this last offseason than the last however many years it was combined. It was a crazy stat. And I mean, Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, Henry really like it. And I know that some people were kind of skeptical about, they wonder if Jonnu and Hunter Henry, like if they knew they were both going to be coming there and like kind of competing for those minutes and I mean, the Patriots have Devin Asai out of UCLA, young kid, just hasn't really been able to do much. And partially because of the quarterback situation last year, but I think people are overreacting to the double tight end thing because I don't know if you guys can remember, but the Patriots in the past have done pretty well with 2 dominant tight ends. So I think that under Belichick, this could be a very good system. Then you bring in a receiver like Nelson Aguilar, who I think Julian Edelman, love him. His time is coming to an end, I think. I think he's getting frustrated in New England. He's getting frustrated with his injuries. I don't see him lasting, like 3, 4, 5 more years in New England. I think he'll either retire or move on. So I think that the Patriots are doing what they need to do. They're starting to figure out some other skill positions. Now we just need to figure out the quarterback situation, which will it be the draft? We'll see. Will it be if they sign Cam for a year? Will it be Cam for a year and then draft next year, free agency next year? That'll be to be continued.
Yeah, for sure. And I had the take on Sean's show last week, Bill Belichick, it's just notorious. He has not been great at drafting skill players. And I think everybody was pigeonholing New England. They got to draft a receiver at 15. They got to draft a receiver at 15. Who's to say if that's going to pan out in New England? It never really has. And the one thing the New England's offense really needs is vertical threats. And you can't deny Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, despite the price tag on it, which we may question, those guys know how to get vertical and get deep. And Cam Newton, I think he still showed that he can still throw it pretty long. I think before the COVID thing, he was really playing well, actually. So definitely intriguing there with New England. Going back to the wide receiver market, obviously Juju Smith-Schuster goes back to Pittsburgh on a 1-year, $8 million deal, which was very surprising, as he had said a week later, he's saying his goodbyes to Pittsburgh. And $8 million, a 1-year deal for a 24-year-old receiver who had 1,400 yards receiving just 2 seasons ago. Absolutely just crazy what happened here. John, what do you make of Juju Smith-Schuster going back to Pittsburgh, and is this going to help Pittsburgh, kind of get back on the track after the bad end of the season?
Yeah, like you said, this one honestly really surprised me. Like he's told his teammates he was pretty much leaving, and then after he signed his deal with Pittsburgh, it came out that he turned down more money from both Kansas City and Baltimore. So that really confused me. Like, you have a chance to go play with Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, but you go back to play with a 38-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. That one really confuses me. But I also kind of confuses me from the Steelers' perspective. Like, they're pretty set on wide receivers. They've got Deontay Johnson. They've got Chase Claypool. They always seem to hit on these mid-late round receivers. So you feel like they could have added something there instead of re-signing Juju. But, they did get a good price on it, definitely. But their issues for me were more on the offensive line and at running back, and they haven't really done anything to address those yet. So I'm not super high on the Steelers right now.
Yeah, it's hard to find any bright spots for the future in the future based on what we saw at the end. They just looked a little old and outdated, I guess would be the word to put there. And Juju, you can make an argument. He may be the third most talented receiver on his own team, based on Deontay Johnson, how reliable he has been for Ben, and the upside of Chase Claypool. So it's very surprising there. Tyler, did this surprise you that Juju ended up back in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think John hit it right on the money as far as talking about reports say he turned down more money to be from two teams that are Super Bowl contenders to go back for a year and play with big old Ben Roethlisberger, which I think Roethlisberger has had a pretty good career. I'm not a Ben Roethlisberger hater like some people are, but again, clock's ticking. He's no Tom Brady. He ain't playing until he's 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. It's not going to happen. And you can see it in his play. He's starting to throw the ball less accurate with less power. He's getting less mobile by the day in the pocket. So it was really surprising for me. The only thing that I can imagine is Juju is comfortable in Pittsburgh and he has a little bit of a leash, with he's last season, you could argue he was more of a TikTok star than an NFL star, and that came back to bite him on TikTok, which was pretty funny, but it was pretty surprising just based off the opportunities that were presented. Like I said, the only way that I can imagine is that there's something going on in Pittsburgh that he has a little bit of a leash and he might not be able to get that in Kansas City or Baltimore.
Yeah, it's so hard to just wrap your mind around it. It really is. Because, the second wide receiver spot in Kansas City, to me, would be so coveted right now. And who is the second wide receiver in Kansas City? We don't know who it is. They haven't been able to fill that spot if you could find a flaw in their system so far. But switching over to the last big domino that fall, another guy who signed for a short-term deal, which was very surprising, but given the injury history, I can understand, is Will Fuller. Obviously, he was having a career last year in Houston with all the turmoil until he had the PED whole issue and he was suspended for the last 6 games of the season. He goes to Miami, which is obviously a big market for wide receiver. John, we knew that Miami needed to upgrade their weapons. They needed to find out. This is the year they find out if Tua is the guy we assume. How much does Will Fuller, is he going to help Tua Tagovailoa get to his potential and even help Devontae Parker take the pressure off of him?
Well, that's really hard to say for me right now. Will Fuller, when he's healthy, is a great player. He's shown his ability in Houston with, even over the course of his career, some not great quarterbacks before Deshaun Watson got there. But that's the big question mark when he's healthy, and he hasn't shown an ability to consistently do that over the time of Texans. And then you have the whole PED thing on top of that. So I don't think it was a surprise that he moved on from the Texans, both because of that and because the Texans have turned into an absolute circus this offseason. But in terms of the Dolphins, they're the benefactor here. Having a receiver like Will Fuller who can slot in very nicely behind Devontae Parker, get deep and get open with his speed, he'll definitely help Tua develop and I think make the Dolphins definite playoff contenders again.
Yeah, it's definitely the best sign the Dolphins have had, and also very low risk, high reward kind of deal. Tyler, there's been a lot of circulating rumors of who the Dolphins are going to draft with the 3rd overall pick. A lot of people have linked them to Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, maybe even throw a Jalen Waddle in there, but I don't know if they're as high on him as the other two. Does this stop you from looking at a Devontae Smith or a Jamar Chase, or are you still full stream ahead on trying to get one of those guys?
I'm still 100% pedal to the metal. I am drafting a wide receiver at 3. Like you said, whether it's Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, this Will Fuller signing, it's great for them. And as you said, it's great for Devontae Parker. He, I think, is a super talented wide receiver that has never been able to truly excel because one, the quarterback situation, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tua both, splitting snaps last season, both played decently well. I think Tua does come on a little bit more of his own this season, starts playing a little bit more kind of like Kyler Murray when he was a couple years ago, just kind of taking over for the Cardinals. But I'm still 100%, as you and John have said, the injuries in the past and stuff, you don't know what happens what can happen to Will Fuller. And even though now you're better at that position, you have a little bit more depth, a couple more options. When you have the Heisman winner or Jamar Chase, who, great season last year at LSU, you have to go and get those guys or else it's a wasted pick in my eyes. So no, I still think 100%. I like the Fuller signing. I think it's, like you said, low risk, high reward for them. I like it. I think it was a smart move, but they can equally combat that smart move with a really dumb move of not drafting one of those receivers.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, between free agency and the NFL draft, just talking about it, this is the second best time of the year as a football fan, in my opinion. It makes me just want it so bad, kind of in a football frenzy, just like you're in a basketball frenzy, Tyler. But obviously that's the way it goes. But thank you both for joining us today on the main show here and Hitting the Field. And we will see you next week. Everybody have a